Hi, I'm Kate from dailytarotgirl.com, and today we're going to be diving into the Justice card. So I'm going to tell you all about Lady Justice, what she represents, and I'm also going to be giving you some journaling questions as well. So have your notebook and pen handy and get ready to really dive deep with Justice. So the image that you see on your screen right now is from the Universal Waite Tarot. And some key words that I associate with Justice is balance, fairness, being unbiased, truth-seeking, clarity, discernment, cool rationality. She's able to cut through illusion and rise above polarity. So some symbols to really pay attention to on this card is the sword. So the sword represents her ability to kind of cut through illusion and get to the heart of the matter, to the truth. And then the set of scales that she's holding, that represents balance. And in some decks, she's depicted with a blindfold, and that just represents this idea of Justice being blind, meaning that she is not swayed by illusion, by how things look or appear on the surface. And another interesting thing about this card is if you look at it next to the High Priestess card, you'll notice that these two cards are actually very, very similar. So the symbolism and imagery is kind of similar. Both women are sitting between two pillars, and hanging between those two pillars is like a sheet or a veil. And another thing that's interesting is the High Priestess is number 2 and Justice is number 11. And number 2 in Roman numerals looks like 11. So there's that kind of tie-in as well. And both of these cards they're both very, very different cards representing very different things, but both of these women are gatekeepers. So they are guarding something. The High Priestess is guarding the invisible, spiritual, sacred, mystical realm. And Justice, she seems to be guarding something like truth, which we'll get into a little bit later in the video. But both of them are sort of guardians. They're guardians at the gate. They're gatekeepers. So the dark side of Justice, every card has a dark side, and I love diving into the dark side. So the dark side of Justice is that she can sometimes come across as being kind of cold and impersonal and being kind of more about logic and rationality rather than feeling and emotion. So I have to make a little bit of a confession here to you. So Justice was the one card that I've been struggling with for years, for over a decade now. When I first started tarot, there was a handful of cards that I just had a hard time connecting with and that I struggled with. And over time, as I've, spent more time with my cards, all of those other cards I struggled with, I eventually came to really understand them and connect with them. And I'm able to read all the cards pretty decently, except for Justice. That was the one holdout card. Some of the others were like 7 of Swords, 5 of Swords. I still kind of struggle with 5 of Swords, but Justice was the one that I could never connect with her. I could never connect with Justice because she just felt so cold. She felt kind of judgmental. I often felt judged by her. And it wasn't until fairly recently, like really only a few months ago, I was doing a reading for someone, and all of a sudden I just had this out of nowhere, I just had this insight about Justice and what she was about. And I realized that Justice is able to rise above polarity. And, she's able to rise above all the kind of hot, sticky drama that goes on. And she can see the truth. She can sort of cut through all those illusions, all that passion and emotion, and she can just get to the kind of cold heart of the truth and really see things as they are and see the facts without getting caught up in the illusions and trickery and how things look on the surface. And I don't know why it took me over a decade to understand that, but it took me a really long time. And when I finally saw it that way, I was like, oh, that's what justice is all about. Okay, now I get her, now I understand her. So I'm gonna give you we're gonna kind of explore 3 different areas that I feel justice represents. So I'm just gonna tell you what those 3 areas are now, and then we're going to dive into each one of them. So the first area is balance, second is truth-seeking, and the third is cool rationality. So let's start with balance. Justice is all about balance. She knows how to consider both sides of a story or both sides of a situation. She knows how to rise above polarity, and she knows how to kind of rise above, you know, the personal stories, the attachments we have to things, maybe even the attachment we have to a particular viewpoint or position. And in this way, justice is kind of really good at like depersonalizing things. And when you think about it, that's kind of required if you want to get to the heart of something, if you want to get to the truth. You kind of have to step out of your own biases and your own viewpoints and your own story to get to the heart of the matter. So justice knows that the less bias she has, the more empowered she becomes. So having that bias, and we all have bias to some degree or another, but having that bias stops us from seeing the whole truth. And in that way, we become kind of disempowered. So the secret of justice, her superpower, is that ability to be truly unbiased. So a question that justice has for you is, are you aware of what your own personal biases are? And I think that this question is easier to answer if you think of it in the context of a specific situation. So think about something that you're struggling with right now. It could be a relationship or a situation. And ask yourself, what are your biases? And where can you benefit from a more unbiased point of view? The other question she asks is, what helps you rise above polarity and get a more balanced view of things? So I'll tell you a little story about myself and some of the things I noticed when I asked myself these questions. I noticed that when I feel like something is personally affecting me, especially if it's affecting my sense of safety or my sense of myself or my sense of my own freedom, when those things get threatened, safety, sense of self, sense of freedom, then I tend to feel more heated and way more biased and less able to sympathize with someone else's different viewpoint. If I feel like I don't really have a stake in the game, then it's very easy for me to be unbiased. It's easy for me to rise above polarity if I don't feel like something is really personally affecting me. So that's what I've noticed about that. But this is a really interesting question to ask yourself. You know, are you aware of what your biases are and where might you benefit from being a little bit less biased? So the second thing that justice is all about is truth-seeking. Truth and justice go hand in hand. If there is no truth, then there can be no justice. If you just have a whole bunch of illusions and trickery and lies and dishonesty, then justice isn't going to arise out of that. So truth and justice go hand in hand. So justice's main objective, apart from being unbiased, is to find the truth and seek the truth. And justice is really good at seeing through illusions. That's what that big sword represents, the ability to cut through illusions and cut through appearances. She's good at seeing through stories and depictions and narratives and trickery to get to the heart of what is really true. Justice always asks, what are the facts here? What do we know is true? What are the facts? So Justice really, really deeply cares about truth. And this is interesting. So when you look at the world through your own personal lens, which we're all doing all the time because we have no other lens to look at the world through, right? We all have our personal lens that we look at things through. And when we look at the world through this lens, we never really see the truth, right? We may see bits and pieces of the truth, but we're always looking at things from our perspective of what we've experienced and our own viewpoints. And so we often, we're interpreting things, we're putting a story on things, we're trying to make things fit into, whatever narrative we've subscribed to. And so in doing this, we don't really see the whole truth. We're just seeing a little piece of the picture. So justice represents the ability to transcend that human limitation of only being able to see things from one limited perspective. So in that sense, justice is kind of otherworldly. And again, this is where she's really similar to the High Priestess, because the High Priestess also has this otherworldly quality. So justice is unique in that she can rise above that human limitation that we all have, where we can only really see things through our own perspective. Now we can try to see things from someone else's perspective. We can put ourselves in someone else's shoes and try to imagine what might it be like, to be another person. But we can really only truly know our own perspective. So some journaling questions that I have for you. Justice always asks, what are the facts of this situation? And again, this is an easier question to ask if you are in like a specific situation. So think of something that you might be struggling with or trying to make sense of. What are the facts of the situation? What do you know to be true? And notice when your imagination, when your storytelling ability, when your judgment starts creeping in. Because I notice that with myself when I look at a situation, I'm like, okay, what are the facts? What do I know to be true? And before I know it, I'm assuming things. I'm assuming this person thinks that. This other person might be thinking this. My storytelling comes in, my desire to weave a narrative and to paint a particular picture starts coming into play. So just notice yourself doing that. Another question is, what happens when you pretend to have justice's ability to see things from all sides? So just for a moment, pretending that you have this otherworldly ability to see how other people are experiencing things and looking at things. What happens when you pretend to be able to do this? Like, what kinds of insights do you have? Sometimes when I'm really struggling with a relationship or a situation with another person, I will ask myself, what might be going on for them in this moment? And whenever I ask myself that, I always get interesting insights. And I want to share with you a weird dream that I had. This was a few years ago now. It was a very, very powerful dream. One of the most powerful dreams I've ever had. And in that dream, and trigger warning, this is a deeply disturbing dream. So I won't go into like the disturbing details of the dream, but in this dream I was being attacked, and I think I was in the process of either being murdered or raped by this guy who was like a gangster, like a bad guy in the dream. And as this was happening, as I was being assaulted and murdered, I could just feel all this fear just like running through my body, like really, really intensely. I was feeling this super intense terror. And then all of a sudden my consciousness jumped from my body into the body of of the attacker, the bad guy. And I became that bad guy, and I could feel all the emotions and feelings running through his body. And what surprised me is that he also was in this state of, it was like this state of rage, but also terror. Underneath it all, it was like this really intense state of fear as well. And It was very, very intense. And then all of a sudden, without warning, my consciousness jumped again, and I left the body of the bad guy, the attacker, and it jumped into the body of this person who was like standing by, kind of witnessing this whole thing. He was also another bad guy, and he was just kind of standing on the sidelines. And I could see the whole scene unfold from his point of view, and I could feel all his emotions, and he was also in this weird state of terror as well. Different, like we all had like different emotions, but it was all underneath. It was this state of fear, this state of terror. And it was just this fascinating dream. It was one of the strangest dreams I've ever had. It was just so fascinating, you know, watching this violent, disturbing scene unfold, but having the perspective of every single person in that situation. And that is kind of what justice in some ways is able to do. I think of Lady Justice as having this ability to see things from all sides and all perspectives. All right, so the other thing that justice is about is cool rationality. So she's really good at putting her emotions aside and using her head and being really discerning. Like, she's really good at discerning what's bullshit, what's truth, what's illusion, what's trickery, what is the truth. And she's really good at making fair and balanced decisions. Justice knows how to rise above the hot, sticky passion of polarity and drama so that she can really see things with this cool, level-headed gaze. She doesn't buy into any spin or any seductive narratives. So some questions that she has for you. The first question is, what helps you get into that cool, rational mindset? Or actually an easier question to answer is, what keeps you from doing this? So what keeps you out of that calm, cool, collected, rational mindset? And as I mentioned earlier, when I feel like my personal sense of safety or my personal sense of self is under attack, that really pulls me out of being like calm, cool, and collected. So for me, what helps me get into that state of cool rationality is moving away from fear. If I'm in a state of fear, I can't be rational. So moving out of fear and towards more of a state of like compassion, more of a state of like love and understanding, that's what actually helps me have that cool rationality. So the wisdom of justice is that justice knows how to step out of her own drama and her own story so that she can make some fair and balanced and level-headed decisions. She doesn't get all caught up in the steamy battles of mere mortals. There is this coolness to her, this like crisp, clear rationality. And despite of her coming across as being a little bit cold, a little bit chilly and unfeeling, this ability allows her to be fair. All right, so thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned lots about the Justice card, and let me know what you thought, and let me know how you feel about justice, because for the longest time I had a really hard time connecting with this card. And so I want to know, how do you feel about justice? Do you feel excited when she comes up in a reading, or are you kind of disappointed when she comes up? And yeah, let me know in the comment section below. So thank you so much for watching. I will be back next week. I'm going to be talking about tarot card number 12, the Hanged Man. So stay tuned for that.